Greetings, fellow keepers and fellow congers. And we're here with yet another Tower Keepers live stream on this wonderful Friday evening. I tried to escape as much of the background noise and whatnot as home as I could this time, but I do apologize. We have people over, so if a child comes running into the room screaming or something crazy happens, I can't really help it. A couple quick things before we get started, though. Of course, today is the much awaited return of the Gem Master Festival. For any new web players, this is probably your guys' first Gem Master Festival. It does take quite a few gems to complete the entire festival at 35,000. As you can see, however, even the lower tier rewards are pretty significant. Going up into the first probably 3 or 4,000 gems, which is what a lot of people tend to save up over the course of a month. You get a couple of rare items, you get a couple of void cores, as well as a fair amount of gold, and then of course when you get up into the 5 to 10,000 range, you start getting even more cores, as well as those stacks of 10,000, 15,000 gold. And of course, at the bottom end of the rewards here, we see yet another stack of void cores, so that's 5, I want to say 10 altogether. Yep, 5, 8, and 10 altogether for fully completing this, which of course is an entire craftsman pack worth of void cores at 2750 gems for just that. And of course we do have the level 30 Vorpal sword that I'm sure has been much talked about in this Gem Master event. This is one of the few chances to get an epic weapon regardless of your level. And altogether it takes roughly 250 bucks or so to complete the Gem Master during a regular 2 times sale. As we can see, this is the first time that I know of that the Gem Master has not come with a 2 times gold sale as well. And the reason for that is during these events, most players buy gems and convert them directly into gold. Of course, with the Tier 2 epics and with the recent surge of players that are gemming tower attacks and whatnot, I definitely understand why they dropped that 2 times gold this time around. But historically, the way these events have always worked is that they will run for about 5 days. As we can see here, we've got a total of 6 days with this Gem Master, which will have it end on Wednesday of next week for those of us in the US. And typically what happens is the 2 times gem sale will run for the first couple days, and then it'll go down on Monday or Tuesday, and will be replaced on the final day by a 3 times gem sale. I personally am holding out for that in particular, especially because we don't have the 2 times gold. So if you do plan on picking up some gems, you may want to consider holding off on some of those and picking them up during the 3 times sale if possible. Now, there is the possibility that they might change the precedent here, and we might not have a 3 times sale going into Wednesday. I personally don't think so. It's also important to mention that this is, of course, a holiday weekend here in the United States. It's Labor Day on Monday. The last holiday weekend, or week rather, here in the US, which was the 4th of July, they ran a 3 times PvP event during that holiday. So we could possibly anticipate the return of the prestige bonus on this coming Monday, and hopefully get an opportunity to stack up some extra points while most of us have the day off of work or school or whatever the case may be. I also wanted to mention really quickly, too, the results of the Dragon Cycle. Although it was a shortened cycle, the Awesome Sauce Guild was able to take the #1 damage spot overall, so congratulations to those guys. And special mention, of course, to their top damage dealers, Raven, Ashbringer, Athanatos, all of you guys who banded together to really kick some butt at the last minute there. You guys did a great job. Of course, Elysium came in #2, and Forgotten Realm came in 3rd place. And real briefly, too, I'd like to talk a little bit about the soft bans that some of you may have heard about. There were a number of players who were banned from leaderboards, whether it be catacombs, tower attacks, so on and so forth, because they were registered as having put in too much dragon damage too fast, or in one hit, rather. It's important to note that this seems to be mostly a bug in an automated system. The system was designed to apparently read how much damage was incoming to prevent against people scumming or scamming additional attacks with multiple devices. And as far as I know, most of the players that were actually affected by this We're not doing anything of that nature. They're all legitimate players, a lot of which have a long standing in the community. So whatever you may have seen or heard, it's important to note that, like I said, most of these guys are very long-time trusted players, and I don't doubt one bit that they were spending their gems and attacking this dragon straight up. And of course, if anybody on here knows me and knows my history with the game, of course I don't really tolerate any sort of cheating or exploiting or anything like that. And neither does most of our more closely knit community in the Discord servers. And of course, there's been a little bit of surgence of people hacking, exploiting, talk of some kind of win bugs in the web version. I just want to note, don't cheat, guys. If you want to be good at this game, all it takes is time and a little bit of effort. You don't have to spend money. You just have to know how to farm, what to craft, how to build your teams. There's really, really no need to cheat, and all it does is ruin the game for everybody else. And we end up eventually becoming one of those games where there's so much rampant hacking that all of the core players quit, the game gets no more money, and the game falls apart. And of course, we all play Tower Keepers because we love it, so we want to make sure that we keep the community strong and do everything we can to help keep those hackers isolated and removed as quickly as possible. So if you ever do see someone that seems suspicious, new level 55s, players at lower levels wielding tier 2 epics, and I mean multiple tier 2 epics, not somebody who might have gotten it from a dragon battle, make sure that you take a moment to screenshot them, take note of their name, and submit an in-game ticket up here through the menu that you can see in the options, and just go down to the profile and support button here, and you can submit an official report and make sure that somebody who needs to see will be able to see that and investigate those players. But first off, we wanted to make sure we jumped into some PvP because, of course, we do have that 2x prestige event going. So if you're watching, Shallow, if you could jump in, and we'll go ahead and try and set this first battle up. And the first thing that we wanted to show was the value of hero stars. A lot of people ask that, if I spend money in this game, what should I buy? And the answer that they almost always get is to buy hero packs. And the big reason for that is because, much like we talked about with hero levels, each hero star is not only going to increase your base stats, but it's going to increase your skill levels. And unlike the small boosts that you get from 1 or 2 or 5 hero levels, each individual skill level is usually going to give a pretty significant boost to your skills. So whether it be the percentage base on buffs like Call to Arms or Battle Fury, or the base damage of attack abilities or soul skills, whatever the case may be, you're gaining a lot more from each hero star than just the statistics that you see when you level them up. And of course, at the 6th and 7th hero stars, you're getting 75 attack and defense at the 6th and 100 attack and defense at the 7th, as well as a huge chunk of additional health points. So it's important to note that those stats, of course, are going to add up against your opponent. And if you're not aware of how attack and defense and damage and whatnot work in this game already, basically, when you attack an opponent, your attack is measured against their defense. If your attack is higher than their defense, you're going to get a damage bonus. If your attack is lower than their defense, you're going to get a damage penalty. And then after all of that, of course, is when the damage on your weapon is applied and all of your modifiers from different abilities, percent-based modifiers, skill modifiers, passives, or whatever the case may be. And with those different attack and defense thresholds, if you have a set of 7-star heroes, as you can see here, and you're going up against an equivalent, equally geared group of heroes with lesser stars, you're going to typically win 100% of the time. Because, of course, you'll be above those attack and defense thresholds. And now some of that will have to do with team building, which we'll get into in a moment here. But once again, Shallow, if you're watching, or if someone here is watching in the TKHQ Discord, could you guys ask Shallow to queue up for us, and we'll have a quick look at these teams with no gear setups. Unfortunately, we're going to have to claim 17 packs of keys so we can spend our guild marks. And of course, if you've ever wondered what the benefits of being in one of the top 1 or 2 or 3 guilds is, that's of course these incredibly filled out guild shops. Both the 1st and 2nd place guilds, Elysium and Awesome Sauce, regularly clear out their entire guild shop and move on to the infinite battle keys here. It's also important to mention that, a lot of web players complain that mobile existed for so long before they were able to get into the game. And there have been a lot of various changes instituted because of things that the mobile player base discovered. And part of that is that the Guild Shop never used to have things like Catacombs maps, and these resource packs and portal stones used to only be purchasable 2 times, and there was no infinite battle keys. So there was a point in the early history of this game where if you had a guild that was spending too many marks, you could eventually reach the point where you were unable to participate in hero battles because you literally could not spend your guild marks. So that, of course, is why we now have infinite battle keys. And with the addition, well, of course, with the addition of the extra marks from the dragon battles and things like that, it probably is time for them to start considering adding at least additional stacks to the items in the shop or something new, whether it be a gold pack or a resource pack, separating possibly the gold and resources in the current resource pack into 2 different purchases. And part of that is because both guilds are now starting to get tens and hundreds of keys every week. And even if you PvP non-stop, you'll never have enough battle keys for that. But here we have our group against Shallow Baby, and as you can see here, another thing that's important to mention is as you level up your higher level heroes, of course, you can see we have a set of rare and super rare heroes where he's using 2 common and 1 uncommon hero. And the base stats for each different rarity typically vary. You have the Monk, for example, who's uncommon but has that passive bonus to attack and defense that allows his base stats to really be on tier with most epic heroes. And then you have heroes like the Pirate or the Thief that have no boosts to their base attack or defense, and are typically going to end up with lower base stats than a higher rarity hero by default. And then there's a little bit of nuance in it between like rare and super rare, rare and epic heroes, where you have a hero like the Samurai that uses the same weapon type as the Templar and has, I'd say, I think 40 or 70 additional attack when he has his attack passive equipped. So there will be some lower rarity heroes that outclass a higher rarity in either defense or attack based on what their niche value is going to be. And of course you have even heroes like the Knight who are going to have a higher potential defense than heroes like the Spell Sword or Shaman or different things like that. Just based on their passive abilities and their purpose in the game. Of course, the Knight's a true tank hero, so he's going to obviously have a higher base defense. So it's important when you're building your teams and looking at different heroes that you always consider not only their current attack and defense, but what their maximum numbers are. And of course, maximum numbers are considering level 55, 7 stars, and max equipment, max enchants. So if you have a hero that is capable of, let's say, 1300 attack, you're going to know right off the bat that that hero is going to be able to take over most enemies' defense thresholds. So, for example, the Ninja, when equipped with the Tier 2 weapons and at 7 stars, is roughly around that 1300 attack threshold. And that's going to allow him to face most opponents without a damage penalty when attacking. And then you can take those particular heroes and figure out which synergies are going to work best for them, whether it be the attack and defense boosts of Inspiration, or the defense debuff of a spell like Baleful Glare, or the percent-based buffs like the War Master's Battle Fury. So an example of when you would want to choose the percent-based buff is when you have a hero like the Blackguard or the Shaman that already has a massive attack rating and doesn't really benefit as much from additional attack as they could from percent-based damage buffs like Battle Fury. So as you'll see in our particular team setups, we have the Ninja and the Valkyrie paired with the Barbarian, and part of that is because the Ninja, like we said, has just enough attack that he's going to be above most heroes' defense thresholds, but then you're going to run into tank heroes like the Blackguard and the Knight that are maybe 100 or 200 points above his attack. So the effectiveness of the Baleful Glare, of course, is to reduce that defense threshold so that we do gain our additional damage. And now, if you could, Shallow, throw some equipment on those heroes and try and put some different formations together. And one of the things that you saw in that last battle as well was that he wasn't using traditional frontline heroes. You saw the Fighter and the Spell Sword as the frontline in both the first and second teams. And whenever you're building a team, you really want to look at which heroes are capable of existing in the front line, whether they die or are able to taunt. And of course, we have heroes like the Templar and the Samurai that seem like they would be viable frontline heroes based on their abilities and things like that. But really, when you look at a hero like the Templar, a really important thing about the Templar that another player, Raven, had mentioned just the other day is that the Templar has basically what you would consider a soft taunt. The Templar has that Resurrect All Allies ability, so typically most opponents are going to start targeting the Templar right off the bat to try and wipe him off the board and prevent you from resurrecting. So while he doesn't have, you don't have to have the actual taunt ability active to draw most of your opponent's fire towards that hero. And that's especially so when you're using a cleric or someone like that who's going to really force them to choose their targets based on resurrections. And that's one of the reasons why the Valkyrie team is so valuable in the lower level brackets from around 25 to 42 or 45 or so, where you can really use that on-death burst ability with both the Templar and the Cleric, and they're either forced to target the backline while they get punished with Angelic Volley and Melt Armor and things like that, or they kill off your front line repeatedly and get hit with those burst damages over and over and over. And typically in those lower level brackets, you aren't going to see many teams dedicated to either ranged or melee damage. A lot of people are going to have a pretty even mix-up of those abilities. So there's going to be a number of players that have no choice but to batter on the Valkyrie and take that on-death damage eventually. And of course, in the lower level brackets, you have the freedom, especially if you're either a paid player or if you're crafting super rare items to try and get an edge, that you can wear the Forbidden Blade and Chain Skin setup on the Valkyrie that in the high 30s and low 40s is a phenomenal gear setup for her because of the initiative and cooldown reduction that's going to allow you to stack Shield of Wrath and Light of Wrath. With the Valkyrie team, yeah, I mean, it also depends on who's playing them. I don't know if any of you guys remember Annesso. He was a member of Elysium for a long time, but he absolutely dominated in those level brackets using that Templar team. And things, of course, have changed with the addition of the new web players and, of course, with the paid web players who have 6 and 7 star heroes in those level brackets. But again, of course, if you're working with a 6 or 7 star Valkyrie in those areas, her attack and defense is so high and just base stats without any gear or modifiers that she's going to really, really do a lot of damage to enemies that don't have magic resistance. If they don't have a proper fire resistance to stop that melt armor damage from coming through big time, you'll end up seeing 1.5 to 2k crits with it, where she basically one-shots heroes. But it doesn't seem that we're finding Mr. Shallow. He's probably still setting up his gear. Yeah, Monk, Mystic, Druid, Knight definitely seems like a pretty good combo, especially because of the stacking dodge of both Fortell and Zen State, but as well as the Inspiration has such a high value when used with the Monk because of his attack and defense passive that instead of the 100 or 108 that you're getting at max Knight level, he's going to be getting 150 or 160 when he's 7 stars. And just like you said, nobody really knows who to target. Do you target the healer? Do you target the support? And if you target the monk or the knight, you're just left battering on a hero that you probably won't kill before they get to do what they're trying to do. And hopefully, as the game progresses, and of course with these new Tier 2 epics, we start to see a little more diversity in the higher level PvP. You know, most of the real fun variety is going to be in that 25 to 45 bracket before you start seeing epic armor and Tier 1 and Tier 2 epic items where there are just dozens of different teams that you can make work. And of course, even at 55, there are other teams than the handful that you see that can be successful. But when you look at a team like the Blackguard, cool, thanks Flannel. But when you look at a team like the Blackguard Mystic Spell Sword setup, or the Doom team, whether you use the Ranger or the Ninja as a fourth, really? I've never seen that anybody say that. I figured that the passive would boost any buffs or anything. Is that confirmed by Rohan or someone? Because I've always been of the understanding that any passive buff, whether it be the Ranger's defense buff or the Monks or the Shamans, for example, gained from in-battle stat buffs, which the only one really that I can think of is shield tactics and inspiration. It seems interesting that they wouldn't stack, or benefit rather, from those passives, because, for example, in the Shaman Knight team, it does seem like after a couple inspiration stacks, the Shaman just becomes unstoppable. Which, again, like I said, I always attributed to him taking that additional passive bonus. Yeah, Zen State and Holy Shield, or Zen State and Shield Tactics, are both huge, huge boosts to defense because they're all percentage-based. Oh no! Looks like some kind of a network error, I'm guessing. It's unusual for him to quit immediately like that. But we will try again. Searching. And yeah, once again, like I said in the first message I sent, if somebody could go and share this link on the Kong chat, I'm sure there are a lot of web players that would like to see the PvP stuff. Most of you Discord guys are pretty familiar with everything that we'll cover. And take 2. And it's important to note as well when we're looking at these teams here with the star setups and the different gear versus no gear and things like that, that Shallow is a 100% free player. And as you can see, he's already got Dark Defender, Ambusher, a number of different epic items. So, you know, anybody who said that if you're free to play that you're going to be unable to compete or participate, of course we got people sending us messages, that's just absolutely not true. There's so much that you can do in this game based on just time and effort that if you know how to farm and where to farm, you're going to be able to pull in tens of thousands of gold per full set of energy, which is 1095 at max level. Leave us alone. Apologies, I don't know how to just shut off this stupid messenger. But as you can see here, with no gear versus gear, and I'd say on average we're facing mostly 5- and 6-star heroes compared to the 7-star heroes and 6-star ninja on our team. He's beating the crap out of our Valkyrie. And while stars are important, gear is just as important in a lot of ways. And one of the big reasons is the base damage on weapons. With that attack versus defense threshold, if you do happen to be above their defense or have attack above their defense and you aren't gaining any bonus damage rating from your items or from your weapons, then you're not going to get the biggest benefit possible out of that. So you'll see a few of the lower level web players who are pay to win or that bought hero packs who have 7-star heroes but didn't bother crafting any equipment because they want to wait to craft tier 1 or tier 2 equipment or whatever the case may be. So of course it's important to note that with the right equipment, most teams are going to be competitive no matter what, so long as they're above 5 or 6 stars. And then if you're facing someone who has all common or uncommon equipment or no equipment at all, you're going to usually have the edge on them. In some instances, like I said, with a team like this Blackguard team, for example, you can see just how powerful a 7-star Blackguard and Spell Sword and Ranger can be when combined with the right spells like Doom and even this Forest Marshal here, Forest Warrior here of the Ranger, that allows her to continue buffing her attack throughout the battle. So of course it's always going to depend on the heroes that you have, and as we all know, the Blackguard's one of the most valuable heroes in the game because of his various passive bonuses, whether it be the defense and armor from Hell's Bulwark or the massively overpowered Find Weakness spell that decreases the opponent's defense by such a huge margin. And again, like we talked about, that's one of the reasons you don't see a ton of diversity in these PvP teams. And unfortunately, sorry, we forgot to unequip our third team. We didn't think it was going to go this deep. Yeah, I mean, you learn something every day. If that is the case, I've approached a number of builds and things like that in the past incorrectly. But I personally have never seen any confirmation from any of the developers or community liaisons, so to speak, in that regard. But as you can see, both stars and gear are incredibly important when building your PvP teams. And yes, thank you so much, Shallow, for helping us out and running those couple of matches. If you don't mind, I'd like to set up and run a few matches against Flannel Mess now, so that we can see equivalently starred heroes matching up against each other, and the importance of putting the right heroes in the right order and having team synergy on your different builds. So if you don't mind, Flannel, if you could queue up with no equipment on your heroes and try and set up a more traditional team setup with a proper frontline hero. Any of the teams that you regularly use should work just fine. But you'll see sometimes in the lower level web players, they don't really consider the value of certain things like wing taunts or debuffs or team buffs, whatever the case may be. So in this particular instance, we'll go with one of the things that I've seen a lot at lower levels, which is trying to just mash up a couple of damage dealers with a healer. Now, if you could take your gear off, it will probably be a better demonstration without the Tier 1 and Tier 2 equipment. Yeah, you see a couple of different things at lower levels. You do see that where players try to put together like the Knight, the War Master, the Paladin, and the Samurai, and try and stall people out or try and have all tanks or whatever the case may be. And like I said, I'll often see these setups where you'll have a player that puts two big-time damage dealers together with a healer and assumes that because they have that healing that that hero is now a viable frontline hero. And the perfect example is that the Shaman and the Spell Sword both. I've seen a lot of lower level players use in the front line here. For this, I'd say we could probably put... Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of those other heroes. Let's pull the Archmage out of our tower. Go away, all you 3 people that attacked me. And of course, as we've mentioned in all of our previous streams, if you're a web player, mobile player, whatever the case may be, all of us in the community very, very kindly ask you to keep your tower filled. There's nothing worse than having to skip 4 trophy towers or 20 trophy towers. Try and get all 5 floors as soon as you can so that you're given 3 random loot drops, and try and keep it above 90 or 100 power if you're a 50-plus player. All you're going to do is help everyone else. And you're going to help yourself as well as you start a trend of other players doing that, where everybody's able to get the best rewards every time. So in our first setup, we'll put the 3 damage dealers and the healer, and the second setup, let's go with the... We'll do the tank group in the second setup. And again, like I said, it's important to consider the team synergy. While we do have a little bit of synergy started in this team here with the Cavalier and the War Master, there's nobody to benefit from it. The Templar, maybe with a Tier 2 blade, could be a considerable damage dealer, but both the Knight and the Templar are considered to be lower-end damage dealers, even with Tier 2 equipment or Tier 1 equipment maxed out. So having the damage boosts of Battle Fury and Victory or Death aren't going to do you any good. Where, you know, some players will get it in their head that having the defensive bonuses of heroes like the Paladin or the Knight or the War Master is going to offset the defense debuff from the Victory or Death. It doesn't matter if you're not gaining any attack. And another one that we see a little bit, mostly as players start to pass that 45 threshold, is using too many magic users. As we've covered a million times, all of the epic equipment has some form of magic resistance. Some of it has tremendously high magic resistance, whether it be 25% or 30% or whatever the case may be. And when you take certain heroes like the Mystic or the Cleric that have those passive boosts to all resistance, you're going to end up with heroes that have 50, 60, 70 resistance to a certain magic type. So it's going to be really difficult to put out any kind of damage with heroes like the Archmage or the Warlock, even when they have maxed equipment. If you're all set though, Flannel, I was going to go ahead and start this one up. We'll jump into the queue and hope we don't find somebody else while we've got these hodgepodge naked teams. So again, like I said, one of the biggest focuses when you're coming up into your 30s and 40s and you're trying to figure out your teams should be trying to take your strongest heroes and decide who they have the most synergy with, whether it be the ninja and the barbarian, or the war master and the shaman, or the knight and the monk, like one of our viewers here mentioned. You're going to want to try and put together a team that benefits from one another. And you're always going to want to make sure that you have one of the 4 or 5 viable frontline heroes up front. And find loot. So as you can see here, he has the samurai up front, but he has the disruption from the ninja available to him, as well as the 2 damage dealers of the spell sword, and the instant smoke bomb from the spell sword and the ninja. So with his damage debuff, or attack debuff from the samurai, he's basically just removed all of the value this team had, with both the shaman and the kensai relying so heavily on their base attack. Getting those massive 700 attack reductions to these heroes, as you can see, is going to cause them to do almost no damage at all. And while we have this one healer, in most situations this healer is going to struggle to even keep themselves up, let alone the other heroes. And after that attack debuff, as you can see, the Whirlwind Strike from the Kensai at 7 stars and maxed out is completely useless. And, of course, we have no equipment on here, so these damage numbers are going to be a lot lower than usual. And then we have the Archmage here, who, as we talked about, is usually going to be rather ineffective because of the magic resistance. In this instance, he's facing enemies without equipment, and even then, you're looking at pretty mid-level damage numbers compared to what you would see against a properly equipped hero. But again, without a proper tank or taunt or debuff, that team was just destroyed. And here we have another team that has a little bit of synergy together. He has the War Master and the Knight to buff each other, and the Cleric to keep the Knight cleansed and healed, while the Barbarian's basically able to do nothing but focus on her defense debuff from Baleful Glare, and punish enemies with her true damage and leaping strike. Now with no equipment, this match will probably take most of the 300 seconds, but he's really able to take that time and take out my heroes as he sees fit. Now, of course, you see we had the taunt set up on 3 different heroes as well. That's something you'll see from lower level players sometimes, where they'll put up a taunt on the knight and then use the samurai as a wing taunt, for example. If you're going to use a backline taunt with a frontline tank like that, there's no real need to put the taunt on this frontline hero. You can use just the taunt of the... Right? You can use just the taunt of the wing hero, whether it be the samurai or Templar or Cavalier, and that should be more than sufficient for taking and absorbing all of those ranged attacks. And we'll try our best with Inspiration and Victory over Death here to boost this little bit of attack we have from the Templar and the Cavalier as high as possible. But of course, the true damage that ignores armor is going to be a lot more valuable against a team like this that's based around tank-style heroes. And the Barbarian is a classic traditional damage dealer. So while we have the Templar and the Cavalier is capable of a little bit of damage, but his skill cycle is so incredibly slow, you rarely ever see his abilities like Valiant Fury or Dispatch Foe, and if they do go off, it's once or twice in a battle. So again, like I said, it's very important to consider when you're building your teams how you combine your offensive and defensive heroes, and to make sure that you're always using a proper frontline hero. And now, Flannel, if you want to suit them up, we'll run just a regular classic battle with best teams and best gear. And you guys, anybody who hasn't seen us fight before will get an example of what high-level PvP looks like. I'm going to just go back to Valk and Doom teams like usual, and I'm going to put my classic setup of gear on those guys. So make sure you use your T2s and whatnot. Actually, we'll try something a little bit different. We're going to put the War Master in here, which is going to make us lose that early wing taunt, so hopefully we don't get the Ninja or Barbarian sniped from us. As you guys may have seen before, we're going to go with the Dark Defender over the Piercing Blade, but we are going to go with the Tier 2 Chainmail. The Tier 2 Chainmail, of course, has that 600 health bonus, and it's got about 60 more attack and defense. We'll throw the King Hammer onto the War Master to boost the Ninja and Folk up just a little bit. We'll give him the old enchanted Dragon Scale. We will give the Praetors to the Ninja. We might actually have the stuff to finish that off right now. No! Alright, I'm not spending all those items. We'll do it another time. And as I was saying earlier, I did craft a Spell Thread robe. One of the reasons I crafted this item, if you take a look at the, if we can find it, max level Aetheron robe, of course the Aetheron has 0 base attack on it. The Spell Thread at level 62 has 62 attack, and it really is about 1 per level. It's a pretty low attack versus level bonus. But even at level 75, we can expect maybe 70 to 75, maybe 1 or 2 points higher in attack, which once we get this up to max enchant level is going to give us about 175 attack on this, which is going to be a pretty decent bonus over the Aetheron robes. Unfortunately, the special properties on this are pretty useless. This 10% fire, cold, lightning damage is mostly a gimmick. It acts kind of like the Cavalier's physical bonus passive or the elemental damage on weapons, but the damage numbers added are so minuscule that it doesn't really matter. And I've had a number of people ask me as well about how I feel about how the Ambusher's Hacker on the Barbarian versus the King Hammer. It's important to note that the King Hammer is capable of a higher damage rating, but not by much, maybe 20 points total. And the King Hammer is traditionally going to have a much, much lower attack, which is going to make a huge difference there, as well as the loss of the crit chance, enemy dodge reduction, and that 10% cooldown for the Barbarian. So if you are going to be using the Barbarian and have King Hammers, you're best off trying to group them together with a hero like the War Master and the Cleric, where she's getting the 10% from the Ambushers plus another 10% from the 2 King Hammers. From everything that I've seen, the best use of the King Hammer is going to be when using it on multiple heroes. So whether that be a classic Shaman team with the Cleric and the War Master, or something new, like I said, using the Barbarian with those heroes, or maybe even bringing in the Paladin into a few different team setups and trying to put something together with that. And it's also important to note something that we hadn't talked about in the past. There is, of course, a new staff available through the Dragon Horde event, and that is going to be probably the best staff in the game for the Mystic. Offhand, I can't remember all of the stats for it, but it's pretty much a defensive staff, just like the Nature's Offering, but it offers better magic resistance, better armor, and some bonus defense. And with that, I want to say there are 2 items that I know of so far in the Dragon's Horde Gold event that are viable at level 55, and that's going to be the cooldown reduction wand for dragon attacks on the Witch, as well as the staff for the Mystic. Now at lower levels, of course, a number of those items are going to be viable, if not significant upgrades over their existing super rare counterparts. But for the most part, I'd say most players who are going to be able to complete that 2 million gold requirement are going to be in the 50 to 55 range. And we'll go with the weaker chainmail on him so that we can save the better for the Shaman. I'm sure it's a lot easier for people fighting me to set up their teams when they watch me set up mine, but that's alright. If nothing else, that's just a good point that you cannot always just overpower people with sheer gear and stars, as we saw in those earlier matches and those demonstration matches. A lot of times, team synergy, equipment, counters to different abilities or different heroes, all those things are going to play into how you fare against higher level opponents or better geared opponents. We wanted to put the War Master on the other team though, so let's put the Necromancerr in here. Unfortunately, we're going to have to use a low-level Dark Defender because I'm a miser and I took my other max Dark Defender and combined it into my Piercing Blade. And that's one thing I'll say really quickly, don't be me. Don't get rid of your Dreadplate and your Piercing Blade or your Dark Defender and your other old tier 1s because you thought you didn't need them anymore. Because the Dreadplate's probably the better plate mail armor for the Blackguard and Dragon attacks. Alright, Flannel, I'm all set. If you're ready, I'll go ahead and queue up now. And of course, as you can see, the Dark Defender is much better for tank builds on the Necromancerr and the Valkyrie in a lot of ways. So it's if you have a nice one, which my other one wasn't max enchanted, but it was max level and probably +5 or +6. And it wasn't worth the combo value that I got from it. It was basically the same as one of the combination boosters that you get from the item quest. So make sure you save your old epics. Save your trophy bosses from the revenge campaigns. You just never know when something's going to change in value or if you're going to end up wanting or needing it in the future. Both of my legs are numb now from sitting, so that's wonderful. Have we discovered him? There we go. One of these days I'll get one of them fancy little remix Android computers so that we can do all this stuff with a hardwired connection. Oh, the bastards picked this damn Necromancerr team. That's an important thing to note about the ninja team that I use. While the Light of Wrath does give you that early soul skill, it doesn't give you an instant one. So if you face an opponent who has a spell sword combined with a ninja, they're going to be able to send their smoke bomb off first, even if you get the starting side and get the first attack out. But we're going to hopefully throw up these shield tactics real quick and save our booty. We don't have to... Oh, that's brutal. Even without the tier 2 blade, his samurai is a monster. As you may have seen in the past, I don't even run an attack skill on my samurai. I just use the Fearsome Visage, the Warrior's Challenge, and Demon Shout. But having lost the Melt Armor and getting our buffs there dispelled, this is going to be a toss-up battle for the first one here. And week after week, Flannel has just become a better and better PvP player. If you are in that 53 to 55 range, you do well to fear him when queuing up and make sure that you're always ready for these different teams. As we talked about the other day with tower attacks, you always want to know your opponent. Know what they're going to run, know what their different potential team setups are, where they like to position them. And some players, unfortunately, don't really change their team slotting at all. So with just a little bit of rock, paper, scissors, you can guarantee wins against a lot of different people. But of course, with no attack abilities on the War Master, as we had in a previous match against each other, once he's able to get you down to just the War Master, he has nothing to worry about. And that looks like that's what's going to happen to us here, unfortunately. The combination of the Energy Drain and Vampiric Touch, as well as the Protective Ward and Magic Jar, make the Necromancerr a tremendous frontline hero. And as we saw yesterday, or the day before was it, in the solo Catacombs runs that we were doing, the Necromancerr can really stand alone in a lot of ways, especially as a tower attacker as well. there'll be a number of instances where he can run through the last 2 or 3 floors of a tower basically by himself. But he has defeated us in the first round. And it's important to mention that this Valkyrie team is not usually taken out easily. I'd say only 2 or 3 players have successfully beaten it easily and regularly. Now, of course, we did remove that wing taunt, which didn't help us very much. The Valkyrie was slain rather quickly with all of those focus fire attacks going on her. So while the damage boost from Battle Fury was nice there, if you've ever seen this team run in the past, of course it doesn't really need it. So we will probably go back to the traditional samurai setup on that first team and continue pursuing that tier 2 weapon for him. And there was some talk in the TKHQ Discord about the tier 2 two-handed slashing weapon on the Templar or the Samurai and which one would really be able to use it better. While the Templar does have some great attack abilities like Leaping Strike, the Templar is always going to be victim to that soft taunt like we talked about, where you can of course wear a max level Fortress or a max level Strength of Legend to boost her survivability, but she's going to always be a target, and she doesn't have that on-demand attack that the Samurai has with the Mighty Strike. So the Samurai is able to combine with the Barbarian like we saw previously and basically one-shot heroes when they are debuffed by Baleful Glare, and you send that true damage hit out with that massive damage rating on the two-handed slashing tier 2 weapon. Which, as you can see, he has on the Templar this go-round, so we'll hopefully get a good example of how that damage plays out on a Templar setup against a true tank like the Knight. And while it does seem a little more consistent in previous battles that I've had with him, and in other situations where I've seen that tier 2 blade, it does absolutely seem like the Baleful Glare is the best combo for that particular weapon and for team synergy. Oh, brutal crit, and that's the wonderful value of that Gladiator's Talons at max level, which is a massive attack and defense, or attack and damage bonus over the Jade Fist, and as a result, one of the higher tier, new tier 2 weapons. I'd put that, the Gladiator's Talons, the Piercing Blade, and the Reaver probably is the top damage dealing weapons. And then in terms of utility value, of course, you have the Praetors and the King's Hammer, which slide into there in the top 5, probably at 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 in my overall top 5 for those items. Of course, if you haven't checked it out, we did put up a tier 2 epic showcase video not too long ago that really shows off a number of the different new tier 2 items and the strengths and weaknesses of them, as well as all the crafting costs and things like that. But good match, Flannel. And it's important to note, too, as you can see, we outgear a number of different players with the max enchantments and whatnot. But as we said, Flannel is definitely an up-and-coming player. He's got a number of max tier 2s. Yeah, you know, I think you might be one of the only players in the game that has that tier 2 bow right now. And yeah, I haven't seen really any 55s that crafted it, and I haven't heard of most anyone that got it from their dragon rewards. I know a few people got the String of Gods, but you definitely lucked out nabbing that true shot, especially because it's really one of those ones that you wouldn't necessarily craft on your own. That's awesome. Yeah, my worry about running it on the Doom team is that the Piercing Blade lowers the Blackguard's defense so much, and that lowers the Ranger's defense so much. It worries me that it makes them too vulnerable from a survivability perspective to put both tier 2 weapons on the Ranger and the Blackguard. Now, you might be able to get away with running the Dark Defender on the Blackguard because he is such a pervasive damage dealer on his own, and then just running the Hell's Bulwark and either Shadow Shroud or Tendrils up front. And then you can just run the Ranger in the rear with Rescue, let her soak up 1 or 2 hits, and hope she doesn't get completely shredded. And if I'm not mistaken, the living leather has an attack bonus over the worm hide. That's maybe 30 or 60 total. But the little boosts like that from these tier 2 armors will make difference in some cases, whether it be stacking them together with the attack bonuses of the tier 2 weapons. But like the ninja, for example, I do think that the spell thread robe probably has more value on him than I wanted to admit to begin with, where that 75 or so bonus attack is really going to help him push himself over the edge. And we're starting to close in on our 7th star for the ninja finally, so we'll finally get a chance to look at him fully maxed out. But unfortunately, we still await all the web players to level up and fill up these queues. You'd think on a Friday night during a 2x there would be a little more people. Which is why I really do hope that we end up seeing a 3 times Valor, 3 times Prestige event on the holiday here Monday. Because the last one definitely had the queues filled out all day long. In fact, during that last 3x, Flannel and I matched each other for hours on end. Yeah, three times XP is huge for the web players. That's, depending on your level, up to 600 experience per fight, which, when the first 3x came out, it was shortly after the level cap had been increased from 50 to 55, and a ton of people were able to level up super fast from whether just running PvP all day long or whatever the case may be. I don't want to use the S word on this stream because I don't want it spreading to the web players. Good luck, man. Alright, this time we'll try and take out the ninja a little bit faster, see if we can't ever get our smoke bomb off first. I'm never just smart to throw the damn Baleful glare. And the Necromancerr really is a hard counter to the Valkyrie in a lot of ways. The Ray of Enfeeblement, the Fear, of course, as we talked about, the Valkyrie tries to get most of her value from that stat advantage that she has over most other heroes. So when getting hammered with both Ray of Enfeeblement and Fear, she just becomes an empty shell. She's not quite good enough to tank or deal damage. It is fortunate that Enfeeblement does fall off rather quickly. Counter death. Beautiful. Although we do see that value of the Valkyrie against opposing ninjas, that she's always able to punish that poison smoke bomb with her counter attack. And it's important to note how the battles against the same teams and same players can change simply based on who's on the starting side or how different abilities go off, whether you crit or not. So you can lose one battle against a player and then win the next one. And of course, as you see, we had the War Master in the last setup. It's pretty evident that the Samurai is probably the better synergy for this team, especially with that Demon Shout ability that gives you the extra survivability for the Valkyrie. Oh no, we have safety ward on. Forgot about that. One thing as well about the Tier 2 armors that we did not know about when we made the Tier 2 Epic Showcase is a fellow community member who had crafted the Tier 2 plate, the Fortress, has discovered that there's a hidden -5 dodge value on there. I don't know if that's intended or a bug of some sort, but when you equip the Fortress, you lose 5% dodge. So if you're using it on Guard or Knight or whoever it may be, usually that's going to leave them with -1% dodge or something like that. So you will not dodge any attacks while wearing the Fortress. Fortunately, you'll be immune to critical hits, which will definitely help in that regard. And when you talk about team building and things like that, as you may have seen, especially for most of the players watching right now, the Spell Sword is almost always going to be a hard counter to this classic Shaman team. The ability to dispel not only the taunt of the Knight, but the Battle Fury, Call to Arms, Shield Tactics, Spirit Rage, all of those different attacks, is usually always going to give the Spell Sword team an edge. But we've been going for just a little while here. We're going to close this particular stream and start back up and cover a couple of different things. I want to try and keep these less than an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes long so people can go back and watch them later. So this will be our first section that has covered a couple of different PvP teams and team building. Thank you very much to Shallow and Flannel for helping us out. Of course, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the Keeper's Corner. Check out our other videos, comment, like, thumbs up, all that good stuff. And we will catch you guys on the next stream in just a little bit here.